Chinatown in the country. And so we have diversity of opinion as to whether we should hold China mainland accountable for human rights violations. But just to enlarge the issue about, this was not just a sort of a boutique issue of human rights in China. We're talking about the grand picture of our role as Americans in the world, in our relationships with other countries. When I'll leave this week and go to the anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge. I think you mentioned that last night. When we go in places, it's about security, it's about economics, and it's about governance. And the security piece of it, in particular, is a list of grievances. One is, why are we not taking action against China for selling weapons to Pakistan, which they should not have been doing? And they said to me, well, we punish the recipient of the purchaser, not the seller. Well, that's ridiculous, right? Because that was their excuse. The second is economics. They had barriers to our trade, no access for our trade to go into China. If you wanted to sell, which was their goal, but we'll compete with you globally. We'll use your designs, shall we say, slave labor, and we'll compete with you. Well, that's not much competition globally. And then the third is governance. How do people treat their people? That has to be important to us. What we say it is. It is a value. And as I've said, you've heard me say it a million times, if we don't hold China accountable for its human rights violations because of economics, then we lose all moral authority to talk about it any place else in the world. So this was a big, we won every vote in the Congress over and over, but we never could succeed with the President of the United States to sign the bills that would have held them more accountable. And they were compromises. I mean, as you know, His Holiness is always looking for a path. And at that time, we had some debate about what the path would be. But we were able to join those involved in the Tibetan cause with the dissidents who were in America at Tiananmen Square, or at the time of Tiananmen Square, to go forward. But it was for me, and that's why we had a big vote. From a security standpoint, we're making the world a more dangerous place. From an economic standpoint, it was totally unfair to U.S. products going into China, ripping off our intellectual property and the rest. In fact, when they finally did get an agreement on intellectual property, the Chinese had said, why are you holding us accountable? It's the provinces. They're doing it in the provinces. We can't be held accountable for that. Well, one of the first provisions of the bill was they should stop using pirated Microsoft software in their trade office in Beijing. So there's no truth to what was going on. And then, of course, the license that money gave them to kill, really, and to incarcerate and to limit freedom in China. And again, what happened though, just so you know this, because this is, I think, important, what happened was, because they could flood our markets with their products, cheap labor, all that, and we don't have any opposition to a developing country having access to our market. That's been sort of, okay, let's help them. But this was abusive in terms of no reciprocity. The trade was like 4 or 5 to 1, coming from them to us. When it was 2 or 3 to 1 with Japan, oh, you're all too young to remember, but it was a big uproar. How could they be flooding our markets? This is double the margin of trade coming in. When that was happening, they were making so much money. Their foreign exchange was skyrocketing, enabling them to use that money to buy geopolitical support.
Needed the basis for their economy, which is struggling now, as we know. Nancy, could you walk us through kind of how the general thinking has evolved? I know in the beginning it was clear that China was going to be changing. There was a detente. There was a political confused situation. One was economic, for sure, and I don't think anyone can defend that. But I think there was a geopolitical thinking also that if they were allowed to build a large middle class, that a sense of responsibility and freedom would trickle up into the government. And I think a lot of choices were made 30 years ago that we realize were completely wrong in their premise and basis. Can you walk us kind of through how that thinking evolved and where we are today in terms of that?
Well, when we were doing this, now mind you, the naivete that I had as a brand new member of Congress, I was there 2 years at the time of Tiananmen Square, and I decided I was going to challenge President George Herbert Walker Bush, whom I loved. You know, he was a beautiful, lovely Republican, but a lovely person, and that spark, he really did have it. And then, but here's the thing, when they were talking about that, they said, oh, Nancy, you're all wrong. It's going to be peaceful evolution. If we as corporate America make billions of dollars off of insurance and financial services, because we weren't selling that much, except financial services. So it was a Wall Street thing. They were making big money at the expense of a lot of the small businesses and moderate-sized businesses. So anyway, you're wrong. It wasn't, I don't know that it was a reason or it was a rationale or an excuse. But anyway, we're going to have peaceful evolution. Rising middle class, blah, 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 pluralism, all that. Deng Xiaoping, who was the prime minister at the time, was president at the time, he said peaceful evolution, he condemned it and said that he would condemn anybody who was advocating. Right when they're saying we're going to have peaceful evolution, he's condemning it at the same time. So it was, again, in my view, how many things they said? We must let them have the Olympics because they're going to help with, are you ready for this? North Korea. How about that? That worked out, didn't it? We have to let them have this because it's going to have peaceful evolution. That worked out, didn't it? So the thing is that President Xi is worse than the others. I mean, I don't have to even go into that. So it hasn't gotten better. It's too bad. And you know, we have global problems. Let's think globally. I have visited Bahrain and seen Iran. I haven't been to Iran, but I've seen it across the water. And if they had silkworms from China, that's their submarines. But when we fear the threat, and this is, you know, not everybody will subscribe to this, but this is what I saw. And that is that if you're going to develop a nuclear weapon and use a nuclear weapon, you need 4 things. You need technology, you need scientists, you need a delivery system, and you need intent. The first 3 were made in China. The intent would be indigenous to Iran. The technology, the scientists buzzing around, weaponizing, you have to develop it. Delivery system, that's their missile technology, that's what the Chinese have been selling all along. And that's the question of would Iran have the intent. So their proliferation has been dangerous globally too. But for some reason, to me it's about money. We have decided we'll have this balance. Now in the meantime, in these 30-some years, they've become a world power. They were a developing country, then we had to treat them as a developing country, which was a little generous of us, but nonetheless we did in terms of our...
They wanted to be perceived that way.
Yeah, also. But they aren't a developing country anymore because they used our money to develop, T-shirts $1 less and add it all up, and they're in Latin America, they're in Africa, all over the place, buying geopolitical votes at the United Nations and every place else so that they are not held accountable.
And he was the reformer. I always remember asking, where is your great rebel, that brings you into the new world? I said, we had him already. It was Deng Xiaoping. From their point of view, he radically changed things for Mao, which he did. But he also said, don't forget about this idea of democracy and freedom. That's generations and generations away from now. We won't allow that. Communications have evolved with them, and how, we've talked about this before, how your relationship with Chinese representatives, ambassadors, etc. Has there been any change in the ability to discuss things on a very deep level and an open level?
Well, there was one change that came when I became speaker. That made a difference in their view. So I was no longer a professional member from San Francisco, and I was speaker of the House. And they came to see me and they said, we want to reset our relationship. We want to invite you to China as a head of state for your delegation to come and we'll discuss issues. And I said, well, you can't expect me to go there and not mention human rights. But I will make it a trip about something, go back to what His Holiness got the Nobel Prize for, climate, the planet. Because we really cannot save the planet unless everybody's in that game, and China being a major emitter, as we are as well. So they had the trip, and we brought our delegation to China. It was quite lovely. They closed down what do you call it? Where Miles' picture is, right across from Tiananmen Square. The Forbidden City. They closed it down, so we had a complete access. Closed the roads. They treated us really well.
There was no one on the highways. There was no one moving.
It wasn't really what we were. Then I told them I wanted to go to Tenzin because I had read that's where they were making some electric cars and all that. And they enabled me to do that, us to do that on high-speed rail. It's about a 3-hour drive. It took 29.5 minutes, according to the conductor, to get there. So anyway, we could praise some of the efforts that they were engaged in. And so we had a good rapport. We understood each other. There was no illusion about what was happening, but we were being pragmatic about how we could find common ground, because it really is essential that we find common ground on the climate issue. In fact, President Xi, both of them, I've said to them, you have to go to Alaska and see what's happening in the Arctic, because the glaciers are melting at such a rapid rate. And while you don't border the Arctic, you impact the Arctic because of the emissions in China, as do we, but we do border it as well. But I never got that, we never took that ship. But anyway, we had that kind of a conversation going. And then they were hosting a luncheon in that room, and when the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee or whatever. And so I said, it's so interesting to see us in this beautiful room, which pays such beautiful tribute to the culture, the people, the religion, everything of Tibet. Why are you trying to crush that? It wasn't a good idea to start the lunch that way. Well, I thought it was. He didn't. Imagine taking pride, boom, and then trying to cyanize it, and therefore eliminate it. So it's a cultural, political, economic, global challenge to all of us, and I think we have to take real pride in the fact that, while it may not look pragmatic, to be concerned about how that third thing of governance is important relates to the economic and relates to the security piece. And that's what we're striving to do.
What I want to get to before we have to stop is where's the teeth? Where do we, the fulcrum point, the leverage point with them? And what we've been able to accomplish, and you were central to all of these things. The very important Tibet Policy Act of 2002 was a huge turning point. It became U.S. law. that we care as an American government and American citizens, we care about Tibet. That was the essence of that. But there were a lot of details that became very important. In 2006 was also another point where things were elevated to another point, and I was there also at that, and it was incredibly moving to seeing Republicans and Democrats and everyone spoke so beautifully on behalf of His Holiness and the Tibetan cause. There was a major event in the Rotunda. And it was almost like we're there, it's like the Sistine Chapel of America there, and people speaking about His Holiness the Dalai Lama as if he was a founding father of America. It was kind of extraordinary.
The President of the United States.
The President of the United States and his wife.
They don't come to the gold medal ceremony. This is not unusual. It's a congressional gold medal. But we wanted the president to come to that.
This was particularly a time when the U.S. was trying to create another level of détente with China. So for everyone to show up and speak so forcefully on behalf of Tibet, I think everyone had to carry some weight after that from the Chinese. The Tibet policy and the Reciprocal Access to Tibet Act of 2018, I think, was another level of bipartisan completely, of bringing to light the extreme policies of China in Tibet, which were continuing and getting even worse. The Tibet Policy Act and Support Act of 2020 and the promotion of resolution to the Tibet-China Dispute Act, which was just passed this year, 2024. These are all important things. No other country has been able to achieve that. This is an extraordinary thing. This group of people, most people who are here in the room right now, were party to that. And bipartisan and bicameral support for Tibet and the survival of Tibet and Tibetan culture, Tibetan society, Tibetan people. We lost teeth with the Most Favored Nations Act removal. Could you speak to that and maybe what happened? What was the thinking at that point? Which was the controls we have over how China behaves to their own people and most especially to their occupation of Tibet. Now, how we lost that and how to gain some kind of teeth against the Chinese.
Well, let me say that I take second place to no one in Congress of the United States in my criticism of China and all the things that we talked about here. But I do object to it being used as a bludgeon in a campaign when it isn't really grounded in what our complaint is. It's just used as a political tool. So we have to handle it not with gentle care, but at least pragmatic care as to how we would go forward. When we were fighting for Most Favored Nation status against Most Favored Nations, we were winning everything. We were winning everything. We were winning every vote, but we couldn't override a presidential veto. Or even if the president signed it, that they would do what they were supposed to do. That would be Bill Clinton. He was not good on this. George Herbert Walker Bush was not good on it. None. I mean, it's just Wall Street at that early time. So, and President Clinton would know that I disagreed with him thoroughly on it. But because they said they were going to do something and it just didn't happen. So that gave the Chinese all the encouragement. But okay, so here's the thing. Know your power in this. The most important force in all of this is public opinion. Nothing, Lincoln said, public opinion is everything. With it, you can accomplish almost everything. Without it, practically nothing. So the fact that the public is aware of what this means globally for security, economically for our own economy writ large, and then also the governance issue being almost dominant in how they govern and how they participate globally from a security standpoint. But But we have to have that drumbeat. And nothing is more eloquent, I said this to you last night, than the voice of a constituent to a member of Congress. So we have to, that's why we have this beautiful, almost universal bipartisanship, House and Senate on this subject. So in some ways, we're grateful to the Dalai Lama for many things, but one of it is unifying Democrats and Republicans in Congress on the subject, because that's not an easy thing, but it isn't difficult in this regard. So I think that the teeth of it all has to really come from the outside. And a lot of it did then because of Tiananmen Square. When Tiananmen Square happened, people knew, they were aware. I don't like what that is. We don't want another Tiananmen Square, but we do want people to know what's happening in Tibet and what that means. And if you didn't even care about religion, language, and culture, just think about the environment. Just think about the environment and the Himalayas and the melting and all the great rivers drying up and the rest of that. So we don't want to abandon our values. Of course, that's our North Star, but we do have some practical messages to give to the American people that how our country, the world, is affected by decisions that are made here in relationship to China. But I think we have to do it with care. Now, we're blessed to have a visitor from the administration. I won't be presumptuous to introduce her. I know that will happen next, but thank you for the administration's leadership on so many things. And thank all of you and your role that you play in beating that drum for goodness. They were just saying to me, need a message for your candy that I give the members. And I said, say this: with faith in the future, with hope in our dreams, and with love in our heart, we go forward. No, I go on with the message, but we have to take the lesson from His Holiness, because, as I said to you last night, He wanted to rid me of my negative attitudes when I was trying to fight for the Tibetans. So he has a different level of, shall we say, I don't want to say combat, what would you say, resolution of conflict, or peace, let's say peace, and some of the rest of us who have been struggling with it. But in any event, let us feel very blessed that we have come into the orbit of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Let us be blessed by Richard's leadership, which calls so much attention to it in that public sentiment, and blessed by all of you in your leadership. It's so wonderful to see you again, but to see all of you. So, Ashidale.
Your career of service has been something that we all look up to and admire and take strength and hope and some of your grace, I think we want to tie to as well. There's a couple of people who I think want to say a few words. I think Undersecretary Isaiah, who's a dear friend of all of us and has been working hard on behalf of the Tibetan people, the Special Coordinator for Tibetan issues. I think she's leaving the auditorium. Elvis is leaving the auditorium, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, good morning, and thank you for that introduction, Richard. Thank you to you and Madam Spinosi for her incredibly well-deserved Light of Truth Award for her decades of leadership the human rights of Tibetans. And indeed, the United States' support for Tibetans and the support of the international community is more important than ever. As a decades-long arc of U.S. Tibet policy, our congressional counterparts on both sides of the aisle, including Speaker Emerita Pelosi, the CECC Chair, Chris Smith, and many others here today, have given the United States the tools and the authorities to keep Tibet at the forefront of U.S. policy, including by establishing my role as special coordinator. So with all of your partnership, this administration has made historic accomplishments over the last 3 years, including enactment of the bipartisan Resolve Tibet Act, focusing on countering disinformation on Tibet and reinvigorating calls for dialogue without conditions between the PRC and His Holiness or his representatives. Second, we've deepened international solidarity in support of Tibet. This is echoed across high-level statements, competitive actions, and through the behind-the-scenes bilateral and multilateral coordination with allies and partners. This was demonstrated by more than double the number of Tibet mentions in the PRC's latest Human Rights Council Universal Periodic Review last January, compared with its 2019 review. And third and finally, we've taken a series of actions focused on promoting accountability for PRC abuses targeting Tibetans, including for the very first time designating 2 PRC officials under global Magnitsky sanctions in connection with serious human rights abuses in Tibet, pursuing visa restrictions for PRC officials involved in the forced assimilation of over 1 million Tibetan children in government-run boarding schools, and most recently in July, imposing visa restrictions for PRC officials for their involvement in repression of individuals in marginalized religious and ethnic communities. Now we know there is more work to be done. Until a negotiated agreement for meaningful autonomy is reached, there is work to be done. Until Tibetans everywhere are able to exercise their human rights and fundamental freedoms, there is work to be done. Until Tibetans can practice their faith as they wish and speak their language, there is work to be done. But perhaps His Holiness put it best when he said, we have to cultivate a vision of a happier, more peaceful future and make the effort now to bring it about. This is no time for complacency. Hope lies in the action we take. This Human Rights Day and every day, let us move forward in partnership to achieve dignity and respect for the human rights of Tibetans and all. Thank you, and Tashi Delek.
I think a presentation here. Oh, we have our dear, dear friend, the President, Sikion Pakistan.
One said is the 35th anniversary of His Holiness receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, and Tibetans all over the world celebrate this day. But I'm here to honor, to take part in the I honor Speaker Emerita Pelosi for her lifelong support for Tibet, and of course, Wichita. So we have 2 big, and then you add Undersecretaries here. Over the last 3 years, we worked together. Under the circumstances of US-China relations, it's very difficult to move forward, but within those constraints, there's Undersecretary Zia and Alison. I want to acknowledge the presence of Alison here. So I won't take too much time because we are short of time. All I want to say is that Tibetans, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and the Tibetans have nothing to offer to you materially. Only thing His Holiness can offer to you is peace of mind. And that is worth more than anything in this world. And that is also the reason why His Holiness gained so much support and appreciation from the leaders of the United States and also from the publics since His Holiness started visiting the United States for the first time in 1979. And since then, our relation has been improving, and now there will be a change in government, and now we have to work towards moving still further ahead with bipartisan support and bicameral support. We will be working towards that, and of course we will have the guidance of leadership, like Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, and our friends both in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. So thank you for all your support. And Speaker Pelosi, your name, Richard, Undersecretary Zia, your name will remain etched in the history of Tibetan people's struggle. Thank you so much.
I'd just like to say something quickly too about Tenshinla has done such an extraordinary job here in Washington, and it's a very tough game here, as Member Secretary and the Speaker Emeritus know very well. Tenshinla is a gentle and sensitive person, and this is not a job she wanted. She didn't crave this. And she's done an extraordinary job, and we love her dearly and respect her. So thank you so much.
And I offered the second scarf to Speaker Pelosi. She was saying, I received one last night. But I keep telling all our visitors to Dharamsala, once you come to Dharamsala, when you go back, you have to open a scarf shop.
When I talked about public opinion, public sentiment being everything, we're grateful to you for your travels in the world, including in our country. Thank you for your leadership in that regard.
Thank you. I wanted to also say all of this doesn't happen because of a few individuals. There are so many to thank. I want to thank Representative Namgyal and the Office of Tibet and all the team and all the Tibetans who have come here on their own time and expense to join us for these days. I want to thank the Speaker Emeritus, staff, past and present, who have always helped us so much putting things together. And I want to thank Undersecretary Zia's staff, Alison, staff, of the office is key to working together with us, and the staff have always helped us. I want to thank also our ICT staff who have been really working so hard. It's a big thing to do to put one event, but we put two events, plus we have Kishimolamla here who had an event last week and another event coming up Thursday at the Library of Congress. So putting four of these together, I asked the staff, is this something we can do? And said, if there's opportunity, we should do it. And everybody jumped extra hard, not only with these for these events, but we also put out a major report last week, Friday. His website, safetibet.org. It's a report on hydropower with really in-depth data. You can be proud of work there. So take a look at that. That is also there. So the staff worked extra hard this week. So I just wanted to forward. We are really looking to 2025 as the Sikkim has announced a global celebration of His Holiness's 90th birthday, a year of celebrating his message of compassion and peace. So our team is working together with partners and others to figure out what the celebration is going to look like, and I think there'll be opportunities for all of you to participate in it and join in it. So with that, I want to say thank you, everyone. Thank you.